So you have people who could be talented athletes, but they still are going to have to compete and lose and practice and get better. As an entrepreneur, right, you're going to start, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to go, okay, I learned that lesson. You're going to graduate to the next lesson. So no matter how smart you are and how talented, and we see all these people that get put up in these places of like, oh, they're so uber successful, but they also went to the school of the process. There's just no way around it.
So the question is this: how do thought leaders, school dropouts, former and current students find out what's next after they do or don't cross that stage? If you want to know the secrets to starting the career or business of your dreams, getting paid whatever you desire, and discovering what you do the best with the least amount of effort, then this is the right podcast for you. I'm Shawn Anthony, and this is School's Over. Now what? The podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Anthony. If this is your very first time clicking that button, I can only imagine what you're thinking. There's so many episodes to choose from, but let me break it down for you and let you know a little bit about what this show is all about. Each and every single week, we continue to bring you an inspiring person or a message that's going to answer the question we all have asked ourselves at some point in our lives, and that school's over, now what? This podcast has completely blown up and is a top 100 business podcast, and that's all thanks to you. We bring you the top entrepreneurs, business owners, and leaders across the globe. And with that being said, guys, if you know anything about this show, you know I like to kick it off, and that's with the review of the week. And it comes from Tran Nguyen, and she wrote, Shawn does a great job reaching out and relating to his audience. It's pretty amazing to see how his work is so informing, uplifting, and encouraging to others. Superb content and interviews, phenomenal work of art. Man, I appreciate you so much for leaving that review. Guys, if you're listening to this right now, if you have been impacted by any of these episodes, and we're 98 episodes in, scroll to the bottom of iTunes, click that 5-star rating, and leave a review. It has helped us do tremendous things. With that being said, here's a quick word from our sponsors. Are you thinking of starting a business? You're going to need a website. Or do you have a business but haven't updated your website in over 2 years? Then you need to hear this. Olive Branch Digital will help you create the website of your dreams. They are masters at turning your ideas to responsive websites that get picked up on Google and all the major search engines. Stop wasting time trying to learn the code and visit olivebranchdigital.com. Mention the podcast and get 10% off your website project. This episode is brought to you by www.patreon.com/schoolsover.nowwhat. For as low as $5, you can help us impact more people, tour schools, and reach communities. You'll also get exclusive Patreon-only content. That's bonus episodes, early access, and be able to go behind the scenes with me and some of our guests. Visit www.patreon.com/schoolsover.nowwhat and become a patron today. All right, let's get to the reason you click that button today. I got you. Our next guest is none other than Gabby Reece. Gabby Reece is a former Olympian, volleyball legend. She's also an actress, model. I mean, there's a lot of things that she does. I just like to say she's just one of the best entrepreneurs out there right now. And there is going to be a lot you're going to be able to take from this episode. We get really into talking about the process, which we all must figure out. Are we willing to go hard for what we truly want? Grab your pencil, grab your paper, enough of me, and let's jump right into this interview with the one and only Gabby Reece. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. And I am here with world-renowned athlete. I like to call her like the legend of volleyball. The one, the only Gabby Reece is on the show today.
Hello. I love the word legend because that's just like a really nice way of saying like you've been around for a minute.
Well, in your case, I mean, you're also a New York Times bestselling author. You're a wife. You're a mother. You got a lot of good things going for you.
Hey, listen, we call that the hustle. I mean, not the wife mother part, but like all the other things that go in the title. That's just a really organized way of saying the hustle.
Yeah, without a doubt it is, right? You've always been hustling. Somebody's listening to this right now, right? Unless they have been hiding from the internet or hiding from sports, and they want to know more about you. Let's take them back, right? Tell me about the little girl growing up. Where are you from?
Well, the largest amount of time I spent growing up was in the Caribbean, the Virgin Islands. But I had sort of an interesting route to get there. My father, my biological father was from Trinidad and my mother's from New York. And so my parents met in California and it was like the late 60s. And, I think they just had sort of a rendezvous-ish kind of relationship. And so they weren't really together. I was actually born in California, but then by the time I was 2, my mother, and I'm really not making this up, I was training dolphins in a circus in Mexico. And so I lived in Mexico City with her until I was about 2.5 and I caught whooping cough. And so then her being from Long Island, I ended up living with neighborhood friends of hers that were a couple in Long Island, New York until I was 7. So I lived with them, my Aunt and Uncle Joe. That's just what I called them. They weren't biologically related. And, these were like very hardworking people. My Uncle Joe did construction and worked for the sanitation department. And I don't know, it was kind of crazy. And they treated me like their kid. They didn't have any kids. And then my mom got remarried and my father actually passed away when I was 5.
Oh, no.
In a plane crash. And so then my mom got remarried to my stepfather, who was from Puerto Rico. So I ended up moving down to the Caribbean for a minute in Puerto Rico, but then St. Thomas is sort of where is my home island. And then I lived there till I was 15. And I think people can relate to this. Like if you live in a really small town or you grow up on an island, you don't realize what a big world it is and that you can do something too. When I was growing up there, I never once thought about going to college. It never dawned on me. I was like, I'm going to power through this sentence that is called high school and I'll get a job, whatever that means. And my mom actually did a really good thing for me and moved me out of there, moved me to Florida my junior year of high school. And I think what happened is that I just saw a really different way of thinking. Most of the kids that I went to school with their parents did have this conversation about college and things like that. And, to be clear, I always say there's a lot of ways to be educated. My husband actually left school in 11th grade. He grew up on Kauai and he's also one of the hardest working people I know. So when I talk about education, yes, the system of education can be so valuable and important and an entry into a lot of things. But I also always encourage people to be self-educated. I think that's super, like the ongoing education, right? So anyway, I'm pretty tall. I'm 6'3", and I was 6'3" at 15 by the time I was a junior. I started really playing sports, basketball and volleyball, because that's what you do when you're that height and they see you and they go, gonna play. And I started getting scholarships, which completely blew my mind. I was like, really? And when I went to Florida State. Was the place I chose. And I remember calling some of my friends back in St. Thomas and saying like, I'm going to college on a scholarship. And they were like, for what? I'm like, and, because I was sort of independent, meaning I had to really, I had to do it sort of for myself. The year after my freshman year of college playing ball, I started modeling, again, as a side hustle. And I lived in New York and I was lucky that it was a good timing and I started working and making my own money. So then after my sophomore year of competing and playing ball at Florida State, I gave up my scholarship because of NCAA rules. They're pretty particular about working, even though it was in a different field. It was just better to give it up. So I gave my scholarship. I paid to play. And then every spring season, I would live in New York and work. And then I'd go to summer school, jam up on credit, so I was eligible to play. August to December, I'd be back at Florida State, going to classes and playing ball. And I did that all the way through my senior year. And then I think that's really where I fell in love with sport and the life of sport, the family of sport, the discipline of sport. And so I actually lived in Miami because I didn't want to work out in New York. It's a pretty tough place to be. Yeah. And I am an in person. And that's when I picked up beach volleyball. was after college. I hadn't played. And then after about 18 months to 2 years of that, I had an older player who played recreationally seriously, but she had a real job. And she said, you should move to California and try to play professionally. And, that's the beauty of a little bit of naivety and enough bravado to think, oh yeah, I can do that. And I was 22 and moved out to California and started playing beach volleyball and kind of the rest is from there. And I was really fortunate.
Wow. I mean, that's an amazing story. You talked about something, and I want the listeners to really grasp. You talked about realizing, hey, I can do that. How important do you feel like it is for, entrepreneurs or people listening to this right now to recognize and have that trait?
I think I'll back you up even more because since then, and listen, beach volleyball is a very small sport. So my whole career, I've been an entrepreneur, and we even have businesses. Some, we have a few very successful and I've, a graveyard of all the failures. Not only thinking I can do it, but more importantly, saying, I'm going to try. I'm not going to let the fear of failure keep me from trying. And as long as it makes sense to who you are, I think it's not about going, well, I should do that, or that would make sense. A lot of people are successful there. I think it's about when you can line up with something that feels really good to you. And even if you are scared, saying, what I can do is I can try. Mm. And I think because all of it is a process of education. So let's say you have all the skills and you're actually built for this idea of what you're doing, a business or what have you, right? Is you still need to go through the education process of doing that. So you have people who could be talented athletes, but they still are going to have to compete and lose and practice and get better. As an entrepreneur, right, you're going to start, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to go, okay, I learned that lesson. You're going to graduate to the next lesson. So no matter how smart you are and how talented, and we see all these people that get put up in these places of like, oh, they're so uber successful, but they also went to the school of the process. There's just no way around it. So I think what people have to believe in is believe enough in themselves and why they want to do something, and that they can endure the process and know that even the best people, you got to get knocked around by that school of process.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so real because every step you make heads you into the right direction, or sometimes you're on a path. What I think is so cool is that sometimes you're doing things you don't even know why you're doing it. And then later on in life, you're like, you know what? That's why I connected with this person, or that's why I begin to realize I like doing this. And it starts to formulate, right? It's almost like a cake per se, right? Everyone loves how a cake tastes, right? But nobody wants those ingredients separate. You don't just want to eat flour, right?
Right.
That's the process. And I think that's pretty cool that you recognize that.
Well, I learned something really interesting from a guy named Ryan Holiday. He wrote Ego is the Enemy and the Obstacle is the Way and such. And he said something really important. And he talked about body of evidence. So let's say you have a listener right now who, they went to high school, and in high school, they took shop class. I don't even know if that's still available. Or they had a after school job. Okay. They could get themselves to work on time. They could learn the skill of the job. And I don't care if it's working at a fast food restaurant. You still have to learn things, right? So let's not downplay any job of any kind.
Yeah.
But that what you're doing in your life is you're building this body of evidence to say, you know what? I don't know how to do this, but I do know that I can try to figure it out, because I see in my past, like when you're a little kid and you climb a tree. At first, you only climb so high, and then you figure out how to climb higher and such. This is building this system of body of evidence where you start to know that, okay, I'm unsure, but I feel like I can figure it out. And the other thing that I think is important that he said is to also believe in the things that you know you can control. So, for example, I can't say, well, I'm going to do this job and I know people are going to love me, or I'm going to do this and I'm going to make lots of money. No. What I can focus on is, hey, I know I can show up on time. I know I can work really hard. I know I'm willing to take a couple knocks. These kinds of things are the things that I think when you talk about entrepreneurship and education, all these things, this is a more realistic approach than I'm going to do this and people will like me or like it. We don't know that. We're not in charge of that. We're not in control of that. And it's just sort of keeping back to, hey, what are the things I can control and I can do?
Hey guys, so let me take a guess. You're enjoying the show. And if that's right, please make sure that you take a screenshot of you listening to the podcast right now and tag me at Shawn R. Anthony _. I promise you this is going to help in amazing ways. And while you're at it, hit the 5-star rating and subscribe. With that being said, guys, let's get back to the show. And that's so real. And I think having that mindset changes the game for anybody listening. So let's go through the path, right? So you go on, they say, you know what? I think you can do this. I'm going to go be this athlete. I'm going to go at it. What were some of the signs? What were some of the early signs that you're like, you know what? Not only can I do this, but I think I can be really, really good at it, like really great at it. What were some of those early sign indicators for you?
I have to be honest with you. I don't know that I ever felt that way. I think I was very sure that I was passionate about it. And again, and because this is important, I believe, because let's say you have people who come from a bumpy childhood or they come from a difficult background. And I have my own versions of it. You're not groomed for success. So you either can do that in almost in a denial way, like, oh, I'm going to get that. And my husband talks about and he's more like this. Be in your mind, almost saying that you are that and then becoming that. Me, I work a little differently. I worked I'm going to work harder than everybody and I hope it works out. I'm hardwired differently, right? But what I did is I followed my passion and I understood there's a system to trying to be as good as I could be, which was, it was taking information in. So in my case, in sport, it was coaching and turning that into execution. If you have a boss, if they give you, things to do, that you learn to execute that. And then saying, I'm going to work as hard as I can. And if I don't get it right away, I'm still going to work at it. It doesn't mean working foolishly, because that's not the point, but it's about saying, I will stand here, until I get it. I never actually thought I was that great. And people will say to me, how did you do all these things, as far as TV and writing and playing ball at the same time? And I was like, fear, and being being totally honest. I think sometimes when you come from that survival place, fear can be really powerful as long as it doesn't destroy you. And just saying no safety net, I have to do this. But directing that at something that can feed you too. And I don't mean in the literal sense, but meaning I can wake up and bust my ass for this every day. If it's something you don't believe in or it's so not you, that's really hard to sustain. But of course, listen, again, I'm very tall. I think I'm a decent athlete. I don't think I'm a great athlete. I think I take instruction incredibly well. I think that was one of my strengths. And then what happens is as you get older and maybe you reach certain plateaus of success, is how do you turn that fear into something positive? And how do you turn that fear into recognizing, oh, you know what? I have these opportunities and I'm so really fortunate. And I'm going to show that I feel this gratitude by continuing to bust my ass and work from a place of gratitude and saying, I'm going to make the most of my turn. And not assume I'm so great and so I'm good, but sort of switch the story if you can.
Wow. I mean, you're really talking about being humble while you're going at it. What are some of the things during those moments, right? What are some of those things you were fearful of? You mentioned being motivated by fear. What had you fearful?
I grew up in a really, unknown way and I was never sure where were we living? A lot of times I was left being cared for by other people. And, And I think like almost like a 101 survival. Cause I didn't really have anyone else to rely on. Like no one was going to pay my rent. And so, and I'll be honest with you, at this time in my life, I still have feet on the fire, a little bit mentality. And sometimes it's really freaking unproductive. It's super unproductive because like I live with a person, I've been with my husband for almost 25 years, who also has a lot of faith. And I think it's like this blend of like being realistic, but also like I heard a gentleman, Jack Cornfield, speaking about this. Be prepared. Let's stay realistic. But also right now, we're okay. Because sometimes we're so far in the future that we're not like, but right now, we're okay.
Yeah.
And so this has been a really tough lesson for me that I'm always working on, always working on. And I just want to encourage people to say, you know what, use that thing. Like if you came from a tough background or whatever, have that and use that belief and also look for mentors. This is a big one. Look for mentors. There's people who want to be mentors. Look for them because we need allies. We need people to help us. But then sometimes recognize like, I'm okay. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. I mean, look how the world has changed, right? Look how I think coming out of what we're in right now, and I'm curious to hear your take on this. How has COVID-19, how has that impacted you?
It's funny. Again, my husband is from Hawaii, so we're island people, right? I joke, we're like tall, white, blonde people, but we're like we're island people. And so we have always felt that like community and sharing and hard work and like certain things, this is kind of how we live. Like, I mean, we have been fortunate to build a very beautiful life, but we're not really fancy, if you will. Like, we have a beautiful life, but we're not, I wouldn't be like, oh, I need this and a yellow diamond. And that's not my trip. So I look at it and I think like he's always on me about being on my phone because I'm the detail work person, right? So I'm on the phone. He somehow escaped that and is pretty smart. Like he's like, oh, no. But the interesting thing for me that I'm seeing is like, so since 2007, 2008, we've had smartphones and slowly but surely we've gone deeper into that world, right? We're in social media. We're spending hours on our phone. And if we had a park across from our house, maybe we haven't used it or walked in it. If we had friends that we could connect with, maybe we haven't as much as we should. And so there's a part of me that feels like, is it the universe? Is it God? Is it nature? Is it going like, oh, is that how you want to live? We're going to show you what that looks like. And all of a sudden it's like everyone on a coastline wants to go to the beach, can't. Everyone near a park can't. I think there's some really sad because people are going to be sick and are going to die.
Yeah.
And then there's also on a flip side, a real tap on our shoulder. Like, do you want to be together or don't you? Really, what are the simple things that we're missing? We're not talking more about getting on Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat. We're not talking about trying to accumulate and get another Mercedes. We're talking about wanting to go out comfortably and commune with one another, get out in nature if we have one patch of it near us. And also, weirdly, I've gone to the market, maybe one or two times, and it is the reminder of how much excess we have. Like, we live in a country with excess, and we not only do we maybe not understand or appreciate it, but also it's sort of like realizing we probably don't need as much as we all have been hardwired to believe we need. Yeah. Right? Like if you go to the store and they say you could take one pack of toilet paper, you'd be like, oh, thank you. Right? So I don't know. I see it all of these ways, but and obviously the underlining thing, and that's been something I've dedicated my whole work life to, is I always said as an athlete, I'd been injured enough to go, I don't need to lose my health and I don't need to be injured to be reminded that really the greatest asset I own besides the relationships in my life is my health. And how we as a culture, we say it, but we don't really do it.
Yeah. I mean, you're spot on. I mean, you're spot on in a lot of different ways right now. And I want to kind of elaborate on a few of those. What this moment and this time is allowing for people to see is what truly is important, right? What are the things we've forgotten about or taken for granted? Because once we come out of this situation, you're right, people are going to die. But once we come out of this situation, people are going to come out of this with a completely new perspective. I believe the next greatest idea lies in this moment of time of someone being alone, or connecting with a parent. You know, people watch shows like Shark Tank all the time. We're always like, oh, how did they do that? How did they create that? Something is about to be created out of this. And I think having this time right now, if you're listening and you're having that moment of wondering, what am I learning? Listen to the examples that Gabby just gave, because I think they're going to be immense value for the future.
Well, and you know, my 16-year-old daughter showed me only 1 week or less, 5 days into this thing, what China looked like on the pollution map. You know, it was like what it normally looks like, and just 5 days after everything being shut down, how clean it looks. And listen, I think the notion of the environment is a nonpartisan, it's a non-denominational conversation, right? This is all of our homes. And so what is kind of beautiful is I interviewed Dr. David Sinclair. He is out of Harvard. He's a scientist. He has a book out called Lifespan right now. But what he talked about is in no time in history have we all collectively had one enemy. Because if we're in the US and it happens in China, we're like, oh, that happens in China. And if you're in Europe and it's happening in Africa, they go, well, that's happening in Africa. So in no time are we sharing one common enemy. And I think that is such the important part, because can we not finally, in some really humanity, non-gender, non-denominational, non-political, country, patriotic, non-patriotic, agree that we're all here on the planet, and also we kind of need the same things.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And just kind of getting back to like, hey, I can, even if you and I right now sitting here have a different point of view on some things, as long as it's like not hurting another person or hurting yourself, can we not create space for one another for the difference and still love each other? And even if it's like, hey, I love you, and you're like, I love you too, but I can't actually hang out with you that much, but it's still not that sort of really definitive, no room for discussion or allowance of different thoughts.
100% agree with that. There's really not one little enemy anywhere. So I'm curious to know your perspective on this. We've seen how, and you're an athlete, right? We've seen how so many athletes have been impacted. What would you say to that person listening to this show right now? We've had those NFL guys, we've had those NBA guys on the show, but we haven't had any athlete on the show since this has happened. What would be your advice, or what would be the words of encouragement Gabby would give that athlete right now who has either had money lost because they're not playing in a game, or has either lost out on their senior year of connecting with friends?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what would be your advice to encourage that person who's in that mind frame that they're not going to have the opportunities that some of us have had in the past? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really interesting point, because I especially thought about the high school senior who wasn't going to play in college, and maybe more on a deep one, heavier level of time and commitment of that excellent senior college player who knows though that they won't go beyond, because only 1% of the population goes from college to the pros. That's just the way it is. I would never be so bold as to say like, well, just stay positive. But what I will say is this, and I've thought about this in my own life as someone who's, aging and had different chapters of their life, is that remembrance of having had the experience, that apex experience of any kind, a lot of people don't get to do that, and it's a really powerful gift. And so, and it would be natural to focus on what we didn't get to do. And I would never take that from somebody, but also to remind them that if you got to have that experience, that level of performance and coaching and camaraderie and competition and attention, take that too. It doesn't make it less sad, but it's remembering the magic of, I got to do something at a really high level. And really at the end of the day, was it about winning just the national championship, or was it about showing up each day, being on a team, being part of something, a collective goal, and doing it at this very high level? A lot of people don't get to experience that.
Wow. I mean, I think that's a completely different level of gratitude, right? Having that opportunity to just say, hey, I did do this. I was in front of people. And that's an interesting perspective. And I appreciate you for just sharing that.
Well, listen, I had a kid, Laird and I have a fitness business, and 6 times a year we do these experiences with like 25, 30 people, right? And I have these brothers, and the one kid just came from retiring, 2 knees out, Clemson, football, real high level stuff, high level thinking, attitude, working kid, 2 knees though, not going anywhere. That's it. Done. And, people don't realize how hard that is. And I said to him, and he didn't ask me, but I just felt compelled to say it. And I said, listen, you're like a loaded gun. You just have to figure out where you want to aim it next. And I think for those people that you're talking about, if you have the ability to have that much discipline and work hard towards something, if you can figure out where you want to aim that next, you can fill that need in a different way, maybe even in a creative way, whatever, help other people. You just have to believe in that process. We talk about the process. It's a formula. So if you're a loaded gun, you go, I hit the target on the left, I'm going to refocus, and now I'm going to hit this target on the right, and believing that. Doesn't make it easy, but it's just remembering how possible that is.
Yeah. And realizing that, hey, you've done things throughout that process that's obviously gotten you the opportunity you have now. What are some of those characteristics, right? What are some of those traits? Or what were those strategies, and then applying them a different way? Without a doubt.
I feel that that's super important.
Without a doubt it is. I want to ask you the question that we've asked every single person that's ever hopped on this show and been on this podcast. Whether you're that current student, right? Or let's say you're a former college student, or perhaps you didn't even graduate. You just dropped out, right? You're asking yourself the question of the show, school's over, now what? What advice would Gabby Reece give?
What could you get out of bed for every day and work hard at, even when it wasn't going your way and when it wasn't showing itself yet? I call it like planting the seed. Sometimes, you do a lot of planning before you see any results. And so to really be truthful with yourself, and again, talk to your mentors, have a solid sounding board, somebody who knows you well enough to sort of understand how to have that conversation and say, on the days that it really sucked, when you're laying in your bed before you put your feet on the ground, you'd say, but I can still believe in this, whatever this is, whatever this quest, this path is. And also, some things are interim. So for example, let's say you're an entrepreneur, you're out of college, you drop out of college, whatever. You have an idea, you believe in it, you think you're going to go for it. You might need to take a BS job over here to fund yourself in the process of going for the real goal. And that doesn't mean you can and you won't make it. It just means you have one foot in reality and one foot in where you're trying to go and build. And that's okay too. And to understand exactly what it is. And for like an athlete, we'd say it was practice so you could go to the game. If you have that BS job that you're keeping the lights on and you're doing your thing, it's just practice. You'll get your time, but you just have to parallel path things sometimes. And, that's like kind of being grown up. That's a grown up approach. It doesn't just fall in your lap.
And that's some of the realest advice we've ever gotten on the show. Sometimes you're going to have to do things you may not be comfortable with, work at places that you don't know why you're even working there. But like you just said, utilize that to go buy you those resources, to go buy you those tools, I like that analogy of it being just practice for the real game. And that's what you want out of life.
And I want to remind people, and I don't care if you're the CEO, if you're the superstar, or if you're the guy right now who has to flip burgers to make it happen. Our value is not in our jobs or our paycheck. And so on the high side and the perceived low side, that is not our value. It never is, and it never will be. Our real genuine value is who we are as a person and what we're willing to wake up and come with each day. And because you know what? It happens on the flip side. You'll have days where you're like, I'm busting my ass and I'm not getting a great paycheck and people aren't being really nice to me. And there's the flip of that of like, I don't have to even work as hard as the next person. I get lots of attention and lots of cash. So how could it be that's your value? It's not. And I just want to remind people, because I think that is a really important thing to know as you're going through things, because my hope for everyone would be if they're on a quest that they're hugely successful, but that's still not their value.
Wow. I mean, and that's, I think is so true. And I think value is something you're going to gain from this podcast. Value is something you're going to gain in the words that you just mentioned. And I know somebody right now, they want to know more about you. And they want to know, say, hey, how can I find out information about her? They want to follow you on all your social platforms. Just give us all of the places that we can find you.
Well, I mean, my Instagram is Gabby Reece, GABBYREECE. And I have a fitness company called XPT Life. But here's what I know. I really don't know anything. I'm fumbling through. All I'm trying to do is do my best each day. And so what I want to encourage people is use me, like I use a bunch of people to learn from, but then kind of try to create your own template. Don't follow any one person, create your own template, because I heard, and I joke that I'm quoting Arnold Schwarzenegger, that success is when your external life reflects who you are inside. And if I could say anything to anyone is we're all very, very similar, and then we're all magically different. And so just tap into your own personal magic and trust that even when it's scary. And utilize different people for inspiration or like, oh, that's a good idea. But in the end, then just keep listening to yourself.
I think that's true. And what I like about Gabby, guys, and one of the first places I discovered you was a couple years back. I read a book called Tools of Titans.
Oh yeah.
And your name popped up. So I want to thank you for being a Titan, being someone in your industry, someone that has been a leader, one of the most humble people I've ever had a chance of speaking to. And I wish you so much success. And for those of you guys that have been listening, always remember, dream it, believe it, go out and get it. Yo, what you think? I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I want to know what you learned. So if you wouldn't mind, would you take a screenshot of you listening to the podcast on your phone right now? Upload to your Instagram stories, tag me at Shawn R. Anthony _, and then let me know in that Instagram story what is one thing that you learned. I love hearing from you, my listeners, thought leaders, former or current students all around the world. Let me know, and while you're doing this, go inside the podcast app, subscribe, leave a 5-star review and a 5-star rating. Again, this helps us reach more people. And if you want to be a part of this mission, helping us change the world one person at a time, it makes a massive difference by you leaving a review. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week. And remember, dream it, believe it, go out and get it.